Good evening. I'm Leslie Haley. I serve as Vice Chair of the Board of Supervisors from the Midlothian District. And first of all, I want to say thank you to all of you for attending, and thank you to all who are attending and joining us virtually this evening. I know this may not be the opportune way to have a meeting like this, recognizing that we have limitations. We have limitations due to COVID that we've been dealing with now for a couple of years. And so, having this opportunity to have and allow folks to join us virtually is a great way. We're live streaming via Facebook Live. We're on the county's YouTube channel. We're broadcasting on Comcast 98 and Verizon 28 on the cable channels. So we are using every mechanism available to us. And I will tell you, we've learned some good things about that, and we'll continue to do that in the future. We did make the decision, this is a county-wide project. 5 of us on the Board of Supervisors, 5 planning commissioners are all engaged along with our staff as we investigate this project. So moving this to a central location, allowing for all of these auxiliary opportunities to engage our community at large was critically important to us. As well, we learned along this process that there are many, many people that had questions and large numbers of folks. And so while I know that there may be some frustrations, we really easily identified that working through this from the perspective of folks online being able to post their questions and folks in attendance being able to share their questions on the note cards that are being shared around the room is the best way for us to continue to answer questions. And we are going to continue to answer questions, not just tonight, but into the future. So you will see our staff circulating around the room with note cards, with pencils and pens. If they need them, please just, raise your hand and someone will help identify and get you note cards, get you a writing instrument if you need one, and then collect those cards, which will be filtered through as well so that we can address those questions. I do know that, that many have been engaged in this process and some are newer to the process, but I want to let you know, this process is ongoing and you're going to continue to have opportunities to express opinions and express thoughts. We have our public portals that have been open and will continue to be open to take citizen comments. Everybody on this board, as well as I know our colleagues on the Planning Commission, are reading those on an ongoing basis. And we're taking some of those questions that are posed there or thoughts that are posed there into consideration and working through this project with our staff. As well as the fact that then there will be public hearings by both the Planning Commission when they hear the case and this Board of Supervisors. So please take advantage of those opportunities. And I just really kind of want to wrap this up by saying, with my comments by saying, we made a decision as this Board of Supervisors when we looked at the opportunity that existed to purchase this property. And we made that decision in full transparency with the public, with a conversation of all of the additional things that it offered, recognizing that growth that was happening in that area of the county, the opportunity to bring schools, to bring a potential of fire and safety if we needed that, a library if we needed that, other opportunities as well, and then looking at what we can do with this additional acreage beyond just another 5,000 to 6,000 residential homes. And so by acquiring that property and having these conversations, we are moving in that direction. One thing I would ask you all remember is, and we've all talked about this, we live here with you. We play with you. We worship with you. Our kids have been, our kids have grown up in these neighborhoods, and we've chosen to step forward into these roles because we believe in our community and believe in what we're doing. So I'm going to ask that you all be respectful tonight to each other and that this process moves forward respectfully. And thank you again for joining us. Mr. Carroll, would you like to offer some comments?
I just want to thank everybody for coming out. Appreciate the input. I am reading all of your emails as they come in. I know some of you may have gotten a standard response back from staff. And, there are a lot of emails, a lot of information coming in, talking with people over the phone on a daily basis about this case and meeting with people in person. And just keep your information coming. So we look forward to seeing what the questions are. And I think, Tommy, you're going to talk about the meeting you're going to hold as well?
Yes, so I'm going to be holding another meeting at the Tech Center early in March, and we were looking to do a meeting next week, but the information is just not ready, and I want to make sure we get as much information as possible. What we're looking for in that meeting is March, and we're going to have that. It's not going to be televised or broadcast or anything, and if you want to come ask any questions, don't be afraid to ask any questions. If you feel like your question is dumb, feel free to ask it. If somebody laughs at you or ridicules you, we'll just bump them out of the room, because that's going to be your meeting. We're going to have county staff there to answer questions. We're going to go through some of the proffers in detail. If you don't understand something, by all means, just ask. Don't be afraid to ask anything. The thing about, the only stupid question is one not asked. There are no stupid questions when it comes to this. When I started doing this planning commission stuff, I was the idiot in the room. I've been doing it 2 years. I'm still the idiot in the room, but I'm a smarter idiot than I was because I asked questions. So I look forward to seeing you guys, and we'll have that date and time out to you as soon as we have it confirmed.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jesse Smith, Deputy County Administrator for Community Development, and just want to echo the sentiments of the folks up here and say thank you for the folks that are both here in person, as well as the ones that are watching virtually. I will also echo the sentiments that we've had very good luck with these virtual meetings. I think the one with the Westerly folks was very well attended, over 150 people. So also excited to see lots of folks here in person as well as online. Couple of just housekeeping reminders. There are sign-in sheets that staff has, I think both in the hallway as well as in the back. So if you don't mind and you want us to reach back out to you, please put your information on the sign-in. There's also a web portal for comments. I know we do receive quite a few of those, so please continue if you have other issues and concerns to use that. And then for tonight's meeting, staff is handing out note cards. I will go through and read each and every one of these the best that I can. I do just ask if you don't mind to try to write as legibly as you can, and I will do my best to read those verbatim and also to answer any questions that may come up. With that, I'm going to be very brief and just provide a quick update to some of the issues that have been raised over the past it's been a few months at least. You could just see on here a brief timeline of where we started, really with initial kickoff meeting back in September, just a really a light introduction to the project, and then moving forward to today, which is at the end there, the meeting on February 3rd, which is where we are. There's really 6, and I'm just going to call them primary issues that we've heard, and I'm going to go through each of these and how the application is being modified to adjust them. In order here, it's buffers, uses, Westerly Parkway, the number of schools that are being placed in one spot together, timing of the north-south road out to Duval, or really a second access to that school's campus, and of course, number 6, which is the desire for continued community engagement. So buffers, we've really heard loud and clear from the folks that live on some of the acreage properties, really out in the Mosley Road area, that they want increased buffers than what the ordinance would require. The ordinance would, as most of you may already know, would only require 100 feet. In this case, we actually heard a request, and it came fairly early on, for a 750-foot buffer. It's difficult to kind of envision where that is for folks, so what we are showing here is a 750-foot buffer from existing residences. So if I'm one of these folks that lives on an acreage property out on Mosley, just an example, I'll kind of pick these folks here, and they were to walk off their front porch or their front stoop 750 feet into the woods, that would be that hatched line right there. From a buffer perspective, it's very large, and that would be completely undisturbed. So we would endeavor to leave the trees, vegetation, everything else exactly as it exists today. Again, this forms what you can see is kind of a zigzag line. The hope would be to kind of even this out and For example, you could see that the buffer actually comes in here. We would square that off as well, again, to provide protections for those folks that moved out to this part of the county and want to continue to have more of that rural lifestyle. So we feel that would protect those property interests for those folks. The other issue that has come up is access to Mosley Road. In meeting with folks out here, it wouldn't make a lot of sense to have a buffer and then put an entrance out to Mosley Road. So one of the other things that you will see following up is preclusion of any access to Mosley Road. So to ensure that that buffer stays as is, that there's no construction traffic, no traffic once a development is fully firmed up there. So that's our approach for the buffer issue there. Uses. There's been a lot of talk about uses, and the one that has really popped up as being causing the most issues from the community perspective, at least in what we have heard, is number 7 there, which is plastic products manufacturing. So at this stage, we're proposing to eliminate that as a primary use. What we're proposing to do is add it as an accessory use, so that if somebody were to manufacture, for example, Intel or Dell or one of the computer manufacturers was making motherboards or electronic components, they could also make the plastic housing that a laptop comes in. Or if, you know, I have a Galaxy phone, if Samsung were manufacturing phone equipment, they could also make the plastic cases. The idea is not to have any sort of petrochemical operation, but really plastic production only as an accessory to one of those other uses on the prior page. One of the other things that has come up is, and there were a couple of different salient points on this one, which is the proposal to locate elementary school, middle school, and high school within kind of this same geographic area. Obviously, I think everyone has been in agreement so far that the middle school is something that really could not happen soon enough, so that has certainly been a priority. There were questions over the traffic generation as well as the overall impacts to environmental features as part of this proposal. You could see on here, there are a lot of RP areas, other protected features. So in order to reduce both the traffic and the impact of some of the environmental features, what we are proposing moving forward is to actually relocate the high school, which you can see here in this blue circle, and find another location for that. It's a little early to say where that would be, but it would not be in this general geographic area. In speaking with the folks over at schools, the idea would be to take this middle school right here and move it more proximate to Westerly. Because as you can see, there are less environmental features here, would seem to be a better fit. But again, this is relatively recent discussion, so they are still working through some of those issues. The other issue that takes care of is it does reduce the traffic on Westerly Parkway. So we're confident now that leaving the 2-lane portion of Westerly, and I apologize, it's just to this direction, leaving the 2-lane portion of Westerly Parkway through the Westerly neighborhood will adequately function for those 2 particular schools, that being the middle school and the elementary school. But we do recognize that we do need to look at enhanced pedestrian improvements for Westerly. In particular, what we are looking at is a possible grade-separated crossing kind of in this area. You would want to put those where they fit topographically. So typically where you see any of those blue lines, that's going to be somewhere where you're crossing a stream or something else where you would have a culvert. It would be suitable for a grade-separated crossing. We would also want to reach out to the Westerly folks and probably go out there in the field and meet with them to figure out the best sidewalk connections and the places that folks would tend to cross, so we can make sure that those are adequately protected when the school goes in. So we'll reach out to some of our contacts over in Westerly and have those conversations. Just to show you the overall map, I did want to echo kind of the ideas of where could the high school go. We've started looking at a couple of sites, one on the east. We've looked kind of down here, also looking up here towards Mount Herman Road, towards the park out there. Again, nothing's been firmed up. The diligence on that is still very early, but the goal would still be to try to keep it in this general geographic area somewhere within the overall 2,000 plus acres. Again, presupposing that can work. But again, more to come on that. There were a couple of other items there relative to those issues. Certainly continued engagement with the community. At the end of Tommy started actually with some discussion on an upcoming meeting, and I'll follow up at the end with kind of the next steps. But certainly we understand the desire for the community to continue to be engaged in that. We have some ideas, which we will discuss with the Planning Commission as we move forward as to how we can still retain the engagement of the community. Timing of the north-south road down to Duval, when the decision was at least was made to move the high school, that became a little less critical, but we do still believe that connection is important, as well as the connection to the north to Mount Herman. So we're looking at the timing of that and how that could fit within a future CIP, while also still getting the middle school built and with an existing funding constraint. So more to come on that one. Did want to touch on these issues in just in a little bit of detail because these have not been worked out, but this is a fairly extensive list of the discussion that we've had with the Planning Commission and the issues that they have raised that we will work through over the next 45 days or so. Again, buffers and setbacks, which we've discussed. The idea that there would be additional detail, so a greater conceptual plan. We're working on some ideas there to provide some surety as to what would be developed. The next bullet is really the one I think is meaningful for at least this group, is the performance standards for light, noise, odor, building height, et cetera. We have some ideas there. We will flesh those out with the commission as to protections for the community from those issues and to ensure that whatever industry ends up in here is one that is good for the community. Further limiting uses, again, proposing to adjust the plastics to an accessory use. And then there's the question of, how is this being treated the same as a privately initiated zoning case? Is the level of detail comparable? Going to work through some of those issues. It is a little bit different in that it is more of a prospective case for at least the west side, and the east side is different, of course, because we're proposing public uses. So those are all different from a private case. The second to last bullet there regarding transportation improvements, the desire to kind of put more standards there relative to when things would be done. That's a tough one because of the geographic nature of this particular property being over 2,000 acres with multiple permutations of what could go first. It's very difficult to say, well, if this happens, then X, Y, and Z would be built. With that said, we're certainly going to work with the commission to try to get some granular triggers in there as to when the community could expect to see certain improvements. One example would be the middle school. We are, certainly the middle school we recognize is happening, so there are specific improvements that would be tied to the development of the middle school itself because we know that's happening and when it's happening. And then the last one, the need for additional data from economic development. If anyone hasn't watched it, I do encourage them to watch the presentation from Jason Olkubi from VEDP. I thought he did a really good job of explaining why this particular site was important, why the zoning is important, and why having it move towards being site and shovel ready would make this a competitive site, not only for Chesterfield, but also for the Commonwealth. Again, I promised to be brief, so this is the last slide. Just want to echo kind of some of the upcoming things. We endeavor to have revised proffers out on February 11th. That is a Friday. Planning Commission work session on February 15th. And then we'll work with Tommy and the folks in the Planning Commission to schedule a community meeting in March. Got to find availability, I think, is the challenge right now. So certainly with that, if anyone on the dais has any questions, I'm happy to answer those. Otherwise, we'll start going through the note cards as well as the questions we're receiving through Facebook.
I do want to say on the 15th, the Planning Commission meeting that day is going to start at 1 o'clock, and it's probably going to be a pretty lengthy work session. We're going to be going through the traffic study with people from traffic. Hopefully by the time we'll have the wetland delineation and the wetlands map so we can talk to environmental. So that'll be a meeting that you can, you feel free to come and watch, but you can also watch from the comfort of your home that day, because that's not a public hearing kind of thing. So don't feel like you have to come unless you really want to be here in person. There will be no light refreshments or anything, so you'll be on your own for that. So.
So we have a stack of cards here, so if you would just humor me for a second, I'm going to try to get these in order, as well as pull up the online questions so we could try to sort through those at the same time. So the first question is please explain why the buffer at the Powhite extension behind Watermill Town's neighborhood is only 100 feet. The right-of-way is 200 feet, says 2,000 feet wide. That's not correct. Why does it have to be so ridiculously close? Why not 1,000 feet? So this is actually referring to, we own the property for the Powhite extension just west of where Watermill is. It does go adjacent to the Watermill Towns. I'll have to double check on the buffer, but my recollection is it's more than 100 feet. We could pull up the plats after this, and we could certainly add this to our website, but I could do it after this meeting if anybody wants to go through that. It is available on our GIS. If you want to go there, you can pull up the plat for Watermill Towns, and it shows both the Powhite Parkway right-of-way as well as the proposed setback. The typical setback off of a limited access facility, particularly the Powhite Parkway, is 200 feet on both sides. So this looks like more of a statement than a question. We would like a town center, restaurants, medical offices, community services, no industrial, no tech. What about buffers? We need to see these numbers on proffers, not just verbally. Where do buffers start, property line or structure? So that went through that pretty quickly. We tried to make it easier, folks, to kind of geographically see where that would be from a community perspective by adding the 750 feet from structures. We will go ahead and again, if folks want to chat about that afterwards, happy to do that, but the proposal would be that we would go ahead and flag that whole line so that people could see where that actually exists in the field. It is difficult, we understand, for people to envision what that looks like. So happy to go out there and flag that entire line of where that would be so you can see it. In terms of how that would be codified within the case, what we would do is craft a condition that would require recordation of that buffer within a certain number of days, for example, of the case being approved by the board, if that's where this ends up. So that's how we would codify that. How is your plan going to impact our drinking water? Putting industrial megasite upstream seems like a bad idea, and this is, and I'm sorry if I get the name wrong, Alex Vashenka from Mosley. So the idea would be that there would be no impact on the drinking water. For these particular facilities, there would be no discharge into either the streams or any groundwater. They would need to discharge into the wastewater system, which again would then ultimately be treated. In terms of conveyance of stormwater to the reservoir, there are strict restrictions around that as well. So we do not anticipate impacts to the drinking water. So this is more, so this is why I think they meant why is planning so bad in Chesterfield? And that's a question. I'll assume that one's rhetorical. Industrial site take a lot of time to plan and execute. Why is this being rushed? Again, this is from Alex in Westerly, it says this time. So again, I think we would agree that there is a lot of planning that has to occur with any of these sites. The zoning or entitlement stage is really just the very first one. There are lots and lots of other hoops to jump through once land becomes entitled for a particular use. There's site plans that have to be submitted. There's lots of permitting that has to happen. So again, this is really just the first step in many before anything could be developed on that site. What needs to happen to remove industrial zoning? I'm not exactly sure what this is referencing. My guess is that the idea would be, so I'm assuming that the idea would be, how do we suggest something else? Again, that's what these meetings are for. Certainly happy to listen to folks that come out tonight and go through the concerns and issues. Do you have any letters of intent or purchase contracts lined up with potential buyers? And there's a who question mark. The answer to that's no. What environmental studies have been done to ensure you protect the watershed? Again, this is hearkening back to stormwater. There are lots of protections built in within any Chesapeake Bay area for the watershed. In this particular location, this is part of the Upper Swift Creek, which is, I think most folks in here know, also drains to the Swift Creek Reservoir. So there are extra protections built in terms of how stormwater has to be treated before it can then be released into the watershed. If there are specific questions, I'm certainly happy to go over what those are. But again, this is the, from an environmental standpoint, the most protected area of the county in terms of stormwater.
I'm sorry. Let's try and be respectful here. Mr. Smith is working through these questions. There's an opportunity for you to write your question on a card. We have people joining us remotely. We have people on Facebook Live. And so it's very difficult to capture all of this other than through one speaker, which is why we've provided. So if you have further questions, please hold your hand up and we can make sure you get another note card. I'm going to ask you to be respectful of the process that exists in this room. Thank you.
I could certainly provide. I could certainly provide more clarity there. There are additional phosphorus and nitrogen removal requirements within the Upper Swift Creek watershed. We typically require super silt fence as an example, and PAM to help remove nutrients as well. So that's the technical answer. Have you considered a hospital or mixed-use commercial for Upper Mag West? The mixed use, I think, that idea has come up a few different times. In terms of that, we feel that the better location would be up towards Hull Street. There are already sites zoned for mixed-use commercial. I think we went through one of these at the meeting at CTC at Hull, which is Cosby Village, as an example. In discussions with that owner, I know right now they're having a hard time leasing up some of the space. For example, restaurants, right now it's very difficult to staff. They have a hard time starting new restaurants or anything that's in the service industry. There is also a mixed-use node already zoned within Lower Magnolia Green. So if you know where Magnolia Green proper is, there's one on Hull Street there. And I know that the developers are, again, kind of waiting for the right time for that to be a viable development. A hospital, I would dare say, within the county, we would consider that, certainly a nice use anywhere in the county. Those do have special requirements to them in terms of certificates of public need and other things. But in terms of medical office, and that would be a permitted use within this proposal. So there could be uses that would be, if not exactly hospital, something certainly like it, and would be something we would support. Is there public support for this project? I would say yes. There is support. I know I've talked to folks. There is support from a large portion of the community. Obviously, there's folks opposed to it as well. We find that's typically what happens. There are going to be folks both in support and in opposition to any project. Typically, the ones that will come out are the ones in opposition, so we certainly understand that. How is manufacturing and industrial use evaluated compared to other commercial uses for this land? Is manufacturing really the best use for some of the land involved in this project? From a county standpoint, I think we're confident that this zoning, which again includes uses in excess of manufacturing, provides the additional uses and potential tax base to really serve the community and provide a more balanced overall revenue. So I think there's a lot of pros to it. Again, the underlying zoning as it sits now is for additional residential. Over the years, I have certainly sat through quite a few of these where we've heard loud and clear that folks don't necessarily want to see more homes out there. We have challenges, again, with schools and other infrastructure. So we, from a infrastructure standpoint, this lends itself much more to solving some of those issues. This is what will it take for the Board of Supervisors to stop the rezoning to I-2? In other words, what legal action can residents take to prevent the board from doing this? I am not an attorney. I won't pretend to be one, so I'm not sure that's what I can answer. But certainly we do have folks here from the board listening, and I think they're certainly taking note of all the comments. What are the root cause reasons that the Board of Supervisors refuses to change the rezoning action to be I-1 instead of I-2? This has already been suggested as a compromise. I did want to note again that the uses that we've listed, those 7 primary uses, would be the only ones permitted on the property. So while certainly I-1 has its fair share of uses, we endeavored to really slim it down to ones that were target industries. Again, if you listen to the speech from Jason Okubi at VDP, these are the industries that from not just a local level but a state level we are trying to vie for, and that have the jobs that we're trying to land in this particular spot. So I don't think that all of those industries would be permitted in the I-1, but we have, again, tried to mitigate that by limiting it to a very small wedge of the I-2 uses. What will the intersection of Waterville Parkway and Old 100th Road look like with the Powhite extension? We do have the Powhite Parkway plans online. They're at chesterfield.gov/road projects. And if you scroll down and go to Powhite Parkway, you could pull that up. I don't want to guess what it looks like off the top of my head. So if the person that wrote this wants to stick around afterwards, happy to pull that up. But also, if you want to pull it up now, you could actually see what's being proposed there. When will we see adjustments to the plans based on community feedback? So February 11th, I'm not sure that the chart's up now, but the revised proffers we will push out February 11th. So you should see those changes in there. For example, the specificity of Westerly Parkway no longer being a 4-lane facility. I know that's one that folks are looking for. And the other ones that I spoke to earlier would be in there as well. In terms of some of the ones that we need to work out with the Planning Commission, those are still in progress. I don't anticipate that those will be fully formed by February 11th. How can we guarantee taxpayers won't be paying for all this prep for nothing? Where are the employment needs studies for local residents? Again, and I hate to keep harkening back to this same presentation, but it really was a good one from the EDP where, there was a very nice summation of why these industries, these specific target industries are important, and why the Commonwealth needs them and why we have not had them in the past. What will ensure once the board members move on that the I-2 restrictions will be followed? And this is from Bonnie Cardone in Summer Lake. So thanks, Bonnie, for that question. So zoning runs with the land. All of the restrictions, any conditions that accompany this case will always run with the land unless there's some affirmative action from a future board to do otherwise. So if another board wanted to change this, they would also have to go through this exact same process, community meetings, public hearings, same thing. So certainly, can it be changed in the future by a future board? Yes. Would it be easy to do? No. When was the Powhite extension promised? How do you expect the existing infrastructure to support truck traffic to an industrial site? How will you protect bike traffic on Duval and Otterdale? So I'll take each of those. The Powhite Parkway has been part of our long-range plan since 1989. There has never been a promise per se, nor has there, truthfully, from a traffic perspective, it's one of those things that while there is congestion that exists on 360 with widening of Woolridge Road as well as the proposed Woolridge Road extension from Old Hunter to 288, a lot of that would be alleviated. While the Powhite Parkway is a very important part of our overall infrastructure, it is not a fix-all for everything. It is necessary to support the overall growth of the county, but it will not result in immediate reduction of traffic or issues on 288 and 360 as an example. It has never been funded. It has never been programmed. We do own a good portion of the right-of-way already, but it has never been part of any sort of capital improvement program, at least to finish it all the way out to Hull Street. How do you expect the existing infrastructure to support truck traffic to an industrial site? This is a good question. One of the things that we have discussed is requiring any truck traffic to come from Hull Street. So that would engender or require at least a construction of a portion of the Powhite Parkway from Hull Street a mile or so north into the site. While we don't think that could necessarily serve the site as a whole in the long term, it would be a good way to get truck traffic from using those other neighborhood roads. How will you protect bike traffic on Duval and Otterdale Road? I have biked out there. It's challenging to bike on any of those older roads that exist. Certainly, those are hard roads to bike on. I would not, if you're a youth, that's not one we would recommend that you bike on. There are other ones that are better suited to that. In terms of specifically protecting bike traffic, there is nothing being proposed at this time to provide, for example, bike lanes on those two roads. But there are conditions that would recommend improving those roads, which typically would include some bike accommodation, although not necessarily a bike-only lane. As a Westerly resident, I want to express my thanks to the board, especially Mr. Carroll, for bringing concerns about Westerly Parkway to the forefront. In the Westerly neighborhood, we are encouraged by the discussions in last week's work session about preserving the feel and safety of our neighborhood. When will we see these updates reflected in official plans and proffers? Spoke to this quickly, but February 11th, we would anticipate that being in writing. And again, I'm happy to reach out to the folks over in Westerly and get folks to meet out there so we can kind of figure out from a pedestrian environment, where's the best place to put sidewalks, ped crossings, that sort of thing. The community has clearly expressed a desire for these two zoning cases to be split apart. There is no reason to link school construction with economic development, fix the roads, build the schools first. The cases actually are functioning separately. They have two different zoning case numbers, but it is important that they be kept together from an infrastructure standpoint to ensure that the left hand knows what the right is doing. In terms of school construction, we're certainly working with schools to endeavor to get the school in place, the middle school in particular, in place as quickly as possible. We'll developing Upper Mag Green and the ground disturbance that will entail expand the FEMA-designated floodplain, potentially encroaching on current homes and neighborhoods. So anytime you do anything in a floodplain, you have to submit what's called a no-rise certificate, which verifies through engineering means that you are not adjusting the floodplain, or it's a de minimis adjustment of the floodplain. For example, many of you may have seen that we have a construction project to replace the 3 creek crossings on Otterdale, so the one on Otterdale Branch, Blackman Creek, and Horsepen. As part of the development of those structures, we had to prove that anything that we put in the floodplain was not going to raise the FEMA floodplain on any other properties. You just can't do that. So there is an extensive engineering design activity that has to happen to do that. Let's see. It is not necessary to have industrial businesses in the area. We don't want them, especially if they're not environmentally friendly. Many of us have well water. We don't want businesses that will be detrimental to us. From a county perspective, we certainly don't want businesses that are detrimental to the environment, well water, any of those either. In this case, I think, the board, developing this application has made it clear that it needs to be a specific set of targeted uses, and then ultimately they will have the final say on what industry goes in there, and if it does not meet the board and the county's high standards, it's not something that they're going to support. So I think the idea that there could be, an industry that's going to be openly polluting or any of that's just not going to happen. And those, again, we will write a lot of those conditions into the case as well, relative to groundwater and disturbances to streams. What is your approach to ensuring the land and water tables are not contaminated? And who do we hold accountable? This is from Dennis Krostick, who is a retired, looks like Chesterfield County Public Schools employee. So Dennis, again, we will include conditions that there won't be discharges into public streams or directly into the groundwater. Typically, these companies would convey everything to the wastewater system, so that they would not go directly into streams or bodies of water. Again, stormwater would be captured, runoff, those sorts of things. That would be external to the site. I'm going to try to, I think I've neglected the online comments, which are, have not quite outpaced the note cards, but I did want to get to a couple of those. How is this not a conflict of interest for the county to buy this land and get final say on what goes in? The property itself has actually been conveyed to the EDA. There are some other properties included within this particular zoning that the EDA does not own that are included. In terms of the final say, this is going through the exact same process that any developer would go through in terms of community meetings and public hearings. These folks are certainly here listening to you. I want to say we've had almost all of our board members now attend one of these meetings. So these folks are here listening. We have our commissioners listening, and I would wager to say that quite a few of them are watching online as well. How could you proceed this project without getting the evaluation from the Virginia Department of Environmental Agency and then from the federal EPA? I'm assuming this means the Department of Environmental Quality. DEQ does not typically get involved in zoning actions. Zoning is one of those nuances of government that is a local issue. We do anticipate that both DEQ and a lot of the other agencies like the Army Corps of Engineers, DCR, will get involved as permitting moves forward. But typically you don't do that at the zoning stage. We're not at a permitting stage. That would come subsequent to plan development. So typically it goes zoning, plans are developed, and then permits, and then construction. So we're a couple steps away from involving some of those folks. Federal EPA, that's not an agency that we would typically deal with from a local level. Most federal agencies pass through their regulations and obligations to their state counterparts. What is the plastics or chip pollution going to do to the water table? Which direction will this flow? Again, there won't be any discharge from any facility directly into the groundwater or streams. You know, it's an unfortunate fact of the past that, you know, as we have some neighbors nearby and some industries nearby that back in the 70s went through, you know, a lot of this. I remember living through the no fish warnings in the James River because of things that were done in the past. Those really don't occur anymore. It's all very highly regulated at a local and state level. So move the school because of health concerns, but what about those of us who live in this I-2 zone? So relative to some of the protections for the folks that are out there, we touched on this briefly in the last slide, and I think this is something that the commission is really going to dig into. It's those issues of noise, light, odor that we are looking to provide protections within the zoning case for the nearby residents. In terms of water and those sorts of things. We've talked a little bit about it, but we will certainly write into the case that there won't be discharge of anything into the local streams and waterways. It's not permitted as is, but certainly happy to codify that again within the zoning case itself. Can we get 2 lanes in Westerly in writing? Yes, on or about February 11th, I think is what we're shooting for. Where are the railroad lines going to come through for your industrial sites, since all require? So these particular uses, these advanced manufacturing uses, chip plants, those sorts of things, they do not want rail. In fact, they don't want rail anywhere near them because of the vibrations for those particular lines. These are very finely tuned instrumentation, and they actually don't want rail. So yeah, no rail lines as part of this proposal. Is it really about jobs or developer profit and higher taxes? Again, it's about balancing out revenues, providing employment for future generations, you know, reducing the tax burden on our residential base. There's multiple reasons why the county has initiated this particular request. Clearly from the what have we heard slide, you have not yet heard the residents' massive disagreement with the I-2 rezoning. Why have you not heard this massive disagreement with your decision for I-2 rezoning? I think it's fair that we have heard folks at this point that are in disagreement with the case. I mean, we get it. We can certainly hear you and read the signs. At this stage, you know, what we are endeavoring to do is provide adequate protections from folks, for folks that are out there, and you know, build the case such that it is one where folks both feel like they've been heard and have confidence that it can be something, you know, that can work. I know I've personally met with folks out there, and you know, on a one-on-one level, I think it's different. You know, I've talked to folks that while they were, you know, strongly opposed to it, I think they would eventually agree, you know what, if you guys can work, you know, these 6 or 7 issues out, you know, then we'll generally be okay. I understand that's probably not going to be the sentiment in this particular room, but you know, I think we can certainly endeavor to get there. And as from a staff perspective, our goal is to craft this case such that between us and the Planning Commission, by the time it gets to the board, that it's a case that everyone can nod their head and go, you know what, we've really worked this, and you know, we've made it into a good case. Why are Otterdale and the Paulet extension not on the issues? Truthfully, from a issues standpoint, at least in the community meetings, the 6 or so that we listed were the ones that seemed to be the most recurring. Within the case itself, there are conditions that speak to improvements to both Otterdale and the Paulet Parkway. So certainly happy to dive into those. The full-blown traffic impact analysis is also available online. We will do a really deep dive into that, I think, as Tommy stated, in the next Planning Commission work session, starting at 1 o'clock on February 15th. We can go through all of the traffic issues and proposed road improvements in detail. Will you consider scrapping this entire plan and starting over with input from the citizens from the get-go? Again, at this point, I think we're in the input process. We listed all of the input that we've received to date. As with any application, it's certainly not complete at this point. When we went out, we anticipated that there would certainly be folks that would come out and have different ideas, and to that degree, I think that's what we're hearing, and trying to meet the request and concerns of the community at large. The county is in the process of overhauling our ordinance/zoning codes. Are any of the plans for this area contingent on changes to the ordinance for zoning? No, they are not. The zoning modernization project is what we're calling, is a completely separate project. This is not contingent upon that. Why does this application have to be as complete as a private application? I'm assuming they, I'm not going to assume anything on that question. But what I will say is all of the application materials are online. Everything is posted in terms of disclosures, who is, what properties are part of the county. Somebody just fixed it. It says, why does it, this application? So I think the answer is still the same. It's that everything is there. If you go online to our portal, there's probably 24 different documents, everything that would be included with a normal zoning application. We're having all the same requisite community meetings. We will also have all of the same requisite public hearings, one of which will be at a planning commission level, one of which would be with the board. So all of the same issues. Has anyone reached out to the Army Corps of Engineers on the wetlands impacts? I have not. I do believe that part of the school construction, I think there have been some early discussions with the Corps on those. Obviously, with the middle school moving, that's going to change that. But I believe there at least has been a pre-application meeting with the Corps. But if folks are interested, I can talk to counterparts in schools and see where that is. Let's see. Why not promote utilization of existing developed areas that are not being used, that contain empty building, office space, et cetera? In terms of industrial property, and this chart is available online, and we've covered it in a couple different presentations. There really are no sites available that meet the state standards for these sorts of developments. The 250 acres or greater, there just is not an inventory of them. While I understand the concern on vacant office and vacant small retail buildings, that's not really a solution for this particular need. Chesterfield County is in desperate need of parks, a larger park that would bring in massive walking, biking trails, amphitheater, et cetera. What are specific plans for Chesterfield to use this land to bring more wooded parks? That's a good question. One of the things that has come up and that we are attempting to do as part of this plan is to provide better connectivity to the park on Genito Road. I think it's Horner Park, a very, very large and underutilized park off of Genito. By providing both trail and vehicular connections, we anticipate that really could be something that folks in this particular area could take advantage of. Also went over the master plan for that with our parks folks today. They have a lot of new infrastructure plan there that will come to fruition as irrigation is now being, water is now being provided to that property as we speak. So be on the lookout for that one to really expand and for folks in the area to be able to get better usage of. When will these changes of plans be expected to be more concrete? Again, I'll point to the February 11th for some of those initial ideas, and then the other ideas relative to some of those other things we fleshed out between the Planning Commission work session, the community meeting, and then the Planning Commission public hearing. So still a ways to go, but making incremental changes as we go. You have omitted performance standards for water. There is no public water out here. We're all on wells. So yeah, that included in the conditions is a requirement for any development to be on public water and wastewater. so that there would not be any drawdown on the groundwater table. Everything there would need to be connected to public water and wastewater. Request, separate Magnolia West and East, so the middle school could happen fast. Elementary school is highly needed. When would this happen? I don't have a timeline on the. Does anyone up here know anything more on the elementary school? So.
Yeah, I don't think the elementary school, I mean, I think that we're looking at possibly that elementary school might be at the end of the bond referendum, but it's not. It's the middle school that that we've committed and actually have financing for to move forward. Correct, correct.
How could you begin proffers when the community still disagrees with this I-2 rezoning? Again, while the underlying zoning would be I-2, it's heavily restricted to those 7 uses. I think we're even suggesting that one should be removed as the primary use. So you're really down to just a handful of uses that would be permitted within this specific zoning district. While yes, it is the underlying zoning is I-2. Again, it's those specific targeted industries, advanced manufacturing, electronics manufacturing, offices, data centers, those sorts of things. Semiconductors, chip manufacture requires the use of hazardous chemicals in 2 to 4 million gallons of water per day. Why is that on the permitted use list? I'm not probably as versed in semiconductors as other folks. They certainly do require quite a bit of water. We do understand that. In terms of hazardous chemicals, I think it depends on the manufacturing type as to what those what they entail specifically. So until there's really a specific end user, it's difficult to say exactly what those processes would look like and how much water they would use. Who is managing the noise smell barriers? What would put in place for these barriers are the same smell barriers, the same as the ones used at Skin Quarter Landfill. Certainly understand that there's lots of opposition to the Skin Quarter Landfill. We have heard that in terms of noise, odor, light. We have chatted about ways to do that. We're not quite there. We are benchmarking with other communities to see what they do. We are obviously not the first people, to do this. I will say, in terms of noise, we are cognizant of, for example, data centers, that there's both a decibel issue as well as a frequency issue. We get that, and we are going to look at best practices, not just within the states, but also outside to see, well, how are other folks able to deal with these same issues. Why would you want to ruin a beautiful residential area with industrial zoning? Again, the goal is certainly not to ruin or change anyone's way of life. That's why we're proposing larger buffers and performance measures over some of these things. We understand that folks have moved out there expecting a certain quality of life, and it's our goal to meet the goal of this particular application, but also to retain that quality of life for the citizens out there by building the protections into the zoning case that the citizens are looking for. When will the 2 zoning requests be separated? They are technically already separate zoning cases, but it makes all the sense in the world to handle them together because of the infrastructure needs. They do need to be planned and zoned together. Why do you insist on manufacturing of plastics? Again, we spoke to this one early on, that the idea of there being wholesale plastic production and manufacturing is not the intention. Again, just using my laptop as an example, the idea would be that you could produce the chips inside it, but also the case that goes around it. And that would be the plastic component. Why do we have to accept an industrial park in order to have roads approved and schools built to support the community? Why in a rural residential area? That's not why I moved in the area. in terms of infrastructure and infrastructure financing, particularly as it relates to state and federal funding, the employment center that's being proposed, the idea of a technology village, makes the county much more competitive in terms of acquiring state and federal funding for infrastructure. It's just the way that those funding programs work. The underlying zoning, the 1,400 or 1,300 odd residential units, that's not going to excite anyone at a state and federal level in terms of funding. So, part of the idea, again, is to reduce the county's reliance on the residential tax base and provide employment opportunities, but also it does help our competitive nature in terms of, the world of funding at the state and federal level. I completely understand that folks have moved out to this area for a certain rural aspect, and we want to try to protect that the best we can through the conditions that are included with the case. This is a residential area. Please do not bring massive industry here. Have studies been conducted on the protected species, animals, and vegetation in the area? Those are underway, and I think the field work has just been completed. We will post all of that as soon as it's available, but there would be typically studies on threatened endangered species, historical resources, all of those things as part of the natural resource inventory. In reference to the plastic accessory manufacturing, serious byproduct is sulfur dioxide that affects the respiratory system. It also aggravates conditions such as asthma and chronic bronchitis. What are the plans to reduce this byproduct to ensure the health and safety of the residences and children attending the proposed schools? I'm not a environmental safety expert. I'm not a chemist. I'm not going to speak to that. It wouldn't do a service to this question. I'll put this one over here to follow up on, and we could do a little more digging with someone that knows those manufacturing and those specific claims and byproducts. Apologies, I have to log back in to pull up the feed. How will this affect the water quality of the reservoir? First off, the reservoir itself, the quality of the water is actually excellent right now. It has always been excellent. We've never had any water quality issues at the reservoir. We don't want any water quality issues at the reservoir, and we don't anticipate them. So, as we've said on a couple different occasions, there are restrictions built in and lots of different ways that stormwater nutrient removal will occur. So we don't anticipate any adverse effects to the reservoir. Any discussion to use the land as commercial versus industrial? We've touched on that a couple of different times. We don't feel this site is suited for commercial uses. Dovetailing with that, any plans for town centers, hospitals, commercial space rather than industrial centers? The town center idea, I think, again, is better suited to those sites along Hull Street. And we have existing zoning that would permit that now. So we don't see a need to zone for additional town centers. Again, what we don't have zoned in the county are spaces for these sorts of large technology and employment centers. What about protections and standards for pollution related to potential I-2 zone uses? We've talked a little bit about that in terms of water. We will follow up, if this is specifically referring to air. Air permitting is probably the most difficult permit you can get as far as a manufacturer use. Not every use would need it because not everyone would be discharging. So that's one we'll have to follow up on. Why does industrial have to happen? Again, we are considering this more of a technology village, not necessarily, the old school thought of industrial. And again, it's for employment, diversification of the tax base, provide for future generations, within the county to have employment opportunities that are both high paying and good jobs. How much empty I-2 does Chesterfield have already? Overall, very little. We have a chart on our website that shows all of that. We can, we can push that out again as part of, the answers to this particular presentation. This is a very specific question. So will the Powhite extension be 200 feet from Summer Lake, section 11? I would have to pull the diagrams up to see which one section 11 is. I think we covered some of this in the Westerly Summer Lake community meeting that we did on Zoom. Whoever asked us, I'm happy to pull those plats back up and show you where that alignment has been proposed. It's just very hard to do in an environment like this. Why not let citizens speak rather than require them to submit a note for the board to pick and choose what they answer? I can assure you I'm neither picking nor choosing to any of these questions. These are all read exactly like they've been written. In terms of why do it in this format, we found that this is the quickest way to get the most answers. In other formats, we've found that a handful of folks seem to dominate the conversation, and we really don't get any questions. We get a lot of other things, but not very many questions. So thank you to you guys for actually writing down questions that we can answer, and thanks to folks again online that are actually asking questions as well. No one ever intends for wastewater to leach into drinking water, but it does happen. What steps will be taken to prevent it and monitor for it? So in terms of wastewater, that would actually fall under our public utilities system. If Mike, I think, is back in the back room, if he doesn't mind kind of coming out while I cover one more question, and he could speak to some of the safety protocols we have around wastewater. Mike's with our utilities department, and in order to free up room up here, we tried to have some of our staff in the back. So Mr. Nannery, if you don't mind helping me out on that one, I will go into the next question. Are there plans to expand Otterdale Road with the new infrastructure coming in? In terms of that one, some of the studies do recommend improvements to some sections of Otterdale. In terms of what's happening now, we are improving, again, the 3 creek crossings, Otterdale Branch, Blackman Creek, and Horsepen. We extended those projects upstream and downstream as well to try to fix as much of those roads as we could while we had the roads closed and the construction crews out there. So there is a good bit of improvement coming to Otterdale. And I think I saw Mike there. So Mike, if you don't mind helping me out on that one. So yeah, Mike, this is Mike Nannery he's Assistant Director of our Utilities Department. Mike, if you don't mind, just kind of give an idea in terms of what safety protocols are built into our wastewater system. How are you guys notified of leaks, that sort of thing.
Yes, sir, I'd be happy to do that. Once again, I'm Mike Nannery with the Utilities Department. I'm the Assistant Director for the pipe system not leaching wastewater into the groundwater. We have watertight pipes. We pressure test our pipes when they get installed. We periodically inspect our pipes, and we monitor them to make sure that they're clean to prevent overflows.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Instead of industrial use, why not put the high school in that location along with parks and other infrastructure to keep Mosley as rural as possible? Touched on this, I think, very quickly. It was probably too fast. But one of the things that we are looking is to locate the high school on the west side, closer to Horner Park. And again, we've also talked a little bit about how we can ensure that folks and residents out there can really take advantage of Horner Park. Right now, because it's only accessible from Genito, folks, if you live in Westerly, you have to go back out to Otterdale, hang a left, go up to the intersection at the roundabout, hang another left, or a long right, and then go a ways down Genito to the park. We're trying to make it more accessible through trails and additional road connections. Where is the money coming from for the Powhite extension? Again, nothing has been programmed for the full Powhite extension out to Hull Street. We do anticipate that being a mix of different funding. We anticipate that because of the sheer size and magnitude of that particular project, it will likely have to involve local, state, and federal funds. We talked about this a little bit, but in terms of getting the state and federal government's attention relative to the construction of the Powhite Parkway, we really do need a employment center or end user that's going to attract their attention. Otherwise, I think we're going to be going it alone from a county perspective and attempting to fund it. That's where we've been for a long, long time, is that neither the state nor federal government have been interested in financing any of the Powhite Parkway. But certainly if any of this comes to fruition, then we envision that situation will change and that the financing will be a mix of those three sources. So, yeah, I've got a handful of cards. I'm happy to speak specifically to the Powhite Parkway with folks that want to chat about it. There's a lot that goes into it. We don't own any of the Powhite Parkway currently. What kind of workers are they intending to attract? This area of Chesterfield County has residents with the highest income. No one here is looking for $15 to $20 an hour manufacturing job. Do expect people from far west or even Richmond to commute. So again, the idea is not that this would be jobs for residents that currently live in the area. The idea is that this is the first step in a long journey of setting this particular project up for success. My guess is that it will take some time, both even post-entitlement as well as through site plans and construction and infrastructure. So the idea is not that this is intended to displace your job if you live in Westerly, but really to provide employment uses for, the future generations. Go through the approved uses for me. Tell me what the public health literature tells us are the risks to environment and human life with regard to each, and then what specific prevention and mitigation strategies are being put in place. Is local government taking responsibility to oversee and ensure the environment and public health? Or are you asking the business to do so? And if the business, how specifically will you hold them accountable? That's more than I can answer in this particular venue. Number one, I'm not qualified to answer that question. Number two, I believe it will take a dissertation to do so. So we will mark that one down as one for future answers, but we will be sure to come back to it and address those specific concerns about public health. What is the schedule for road improvements around Upper Magnolia, and how is this schedule aligned with projected development of Upper Magnolia? Right now, the way that the conditions are written would require a supplemental traffic analysis to be submitted with anything that occurs in the western property, such that we could determine that specific impact of that specific use and the specific mitigating road improvements that are necessary. What is currently included in the case is an exhaustive laundry list of all the improvements for the entire 2,000 plus acres. Absent knowing what is coming in and when it's coming in, it would be impossible to develop a reasonable phasing plan around those. Now, with that said, I think the commission has certainly asked us to come up with more specificity around some of the road improvements, so we're going to see if we can at least try to break it down into buckets for major improvements. Are you going to propose some new parks and paths to bike on instead in this area? Yeah, on the eastern side, we are hoping to provide bike and ped facilities to connect, again, to the new amenities and the expanded amenities in Horner Park. So this one, in fact, is directed to Tom Owens. Do you know when the county will apply to the VMRC about wetland and environmental protection?
I actually answered that online, so I think there was some confusion. The wetland delineation and the natural resource has been completed by Timmons and has been submitted to environmental, and they're currently working that up, so we'll know what the outcome of that is here in the near future.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. And VMRC is Virginia Marine Resources Commission, so they would typically not regulate upland wetlands. They would be more of tidal wetlands. So Again, we typically coordinate with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers on wetland impacts and all various other agencies. But Mr. Owens is certainly correct that the field work has been done for the natural resource inventory, and we will make those documents available. Will there be a dedicated entrance exit ramp to Powhite for the industrial site? So the idea would be that there would be an interchange at Powhite and Woolridge, where it would be extended through Magnolia Green. If you drive through there, it eventually would tie into the Powhite Parkway, and that would be the major access to the proposed site. Will there be any impact to the Metro Richmond Zoo? None anticipated. Is local government taking responsibility to oversee and ensure? So this is very similar to the other question: protection of the environment and public health, or requiring the business to do so. Again, we can get back to those public health questions, and certainly happy to provide more information there regarding what regulations would exist. What about the smell? Again, we have heard this from folks out there because of the landfill, and we certainly understand those concerns. We don't anticipate there being specific odor from these, but again, we will work to provide those written protections into the zoning case as well. How do you know that if environmental studies are not complete? I'm assuming that was a reply to a specific statement. It's the challenge with trying to do this live through Facebook streaming. Noise, odor, lights, how do you manage this when the plant is outside our door? Again, we haven't finished these, but it would be for example, for noise, you could set maximum decibel levels at property lines, as well as setting max or a range of different frequencies. Do the same thing with light. So there are ways to ensure that for Joe Q Public or Jane Q Public that lives nearby, that those are not impacts. Semiconductor plants are one of the biggest causes of Superfund sites. Why would you risk it? Yeah, Superfund sites are, and I know what you're referring to, but again, those are a bastion from decades-old mistakes back in the 60s and 70s. Superfund sites, by name, just those are not what happens today. Regulations around all manufacture are much more stringent than they were. Those just are not things that you would see these days. How do you work out light pollution where once there were woods? Again, this just speaking specifically to, for example, Mosley Road, the 750 feet of trees would still remain, and then the fixtures could potentially be fully shielded, so you would not see any light, and they would also be required to have a maximum foot candle level at property lines, as well as to be directed downward, so you wouldn't have that spillover of lighting. Why is commercial not a feasible replacement for I-2? Again, this is just not a commercially viable site. The rooftops are not available in that proximate area to serve it. There are other sites already zoned for those commercial uses, which at this time still can't, are not full. They've been, wow, they've been ruining Chester for 60 years. Why not double down on industrial zoning there? So that's clearly not written by our Chester resident. I'm not going to answer that. I think I'm taking that as a rhetorical question.
Mr. Smith?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I just jump in and say, folks, we're just about 10 minutes before, so if you've got any final questions, please make sure you get them to Susan on your note card so that we can address those. But out of courtesy to everybody participating, we did agree we would wrap this up at 8:30. So thank you. Okay, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure folks we stay on time here. Thanks, Mr. Smith.
I could use the break, honestly. What does the future look like for Grange Hall Elementary School? I'm not aware of any plans to do anything at Grange Hall at this point. Very much beloved school. I know folks, that area do have children that go there, so nothing in terms of Grange Hall. I'm going to try to go through some note cards. How can you guarantee that plastics would never be a primary product if zoned industrial? So that's through the site plan and development process. We do actually find out what these particular industries are. Again, the board would have the final say on anything that goes in here. So if plastics is not allowed as a primary use, then a plastics manufacturer would not be permitted to purchase or lease any of the property. Why rezone before environmental impact studies have been conducted? Can the zoning be changed back? Again, there are environmental studies being done. As part of this, those will be posted in terms of changing the zoning back. We touched on this very briefly, but again, any zoning change is a board action. So, you know, again, that would be something that would be up to a specific board of supervisors. Can a technical person answer our questions and not the chief marketing officer, please? You're not answering our questions, just giving bureaucratic speak. So again, I'm not the chief marketing officer. I'm not sure if that would be a promotion or demotion. In terms of technical, I am a licensed engineer in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I do have a bachelor's degree in biological systems engineering. I am slightly offended by that one too, by the way. So. Are the data centers run 24 hours per day? So is traffic 24 hours? Again, we're talking perspective industries, so it's impossible to answer whether or not they would be 24 hours a day or not. In terms of data centers, we can certainly try to dig a little bit more into that and find out what the norm is for those. Thank you to the Board of Supervisors for the opportunity to ask questions via the note cards. I'd like to draw attention to the rules of procedure of the Board of Supervisors. Citizen comment period. Why has decision been made to not follow the established rules in pursuant to section 3.4 of the county charter? This is not an official board meeting. This is a community meeting that the board members and the planning commissioner and the administration are holding again to get additional community input in this particular format. So, not an official board meeting that would be subject to any of those rules in the charter. Is this I-2 revenue so necessary the board cannot balance the county's budget in years 1 through 10 without the I-2 revenue? In other words, is this I-2 rezoning necessary to balance the county's budget? Is there no other solution? I don't know, Dr. Casey, if you want to speak, you have more of a budget background than I do, for sure.
Yeah, fair question. Again, we're not balancing the next fiscal year or even fiscal years in the next 5 years with any project that would be here. Again, this is just a long-term goal of bringing the residential commercial in line and balance. Our 95-cent tax rate that's proposed to be 93, that the board's already lowered it as far as a public hearing, is still probably too high to many residents and prospective businesses. So we feel the need to try and balance it out, lower the burdens, as well as take the revenues from such commercial endeavors to invest it into the infrastructure, schools, roads, and others that, again, you as a community have said many times, we are behind in all of those things. So the only way to catch up is to rely upon the commercial sector and its tax-generating revenue.
Why focus on industrial manufacturing jobs with lower wages in an area where homes are selling in the 600s to 1 million? The industries that we've targeted, those average wages are the ones we've looked at are the 90s to the six figures. These are not $15 to $20 an hour jobs. Again, not that there's anything wrong with those jobs either. Certainly, I'm not above that. Why can't you rezone some of your empty I-1 already to I-2? Again, it's a misnomer that there are just swaths of industrially zoned vacant property in the county. It really just doesn't exist. Will these companies be sourcing their water and dumping their waste into our municipal system? How is the system equipped to remove hazardous chemicals from these industrial uses? How will our drinking water and recreational water bodies be protected? Yeah, if there were any discharge into the wastewater system, they would need a permit to do that. That would go through our utilities department, so we would know in detail the composition of any of that. We have an extensive both pre-treatment and monitoring for all of that. So that is heavily regulated, both on the county side as well as I believe on the state side. How is it equipped to remove hazardous chemicals from these industrial uses. Again, it depends on what it is. The wastewater treatment plants and the water treatment plants do a variety of different things. So, absent knowing what that is, we can't speak to the chemical composition or what would be necessary to mitigate it, only that we're confident that we've got the right folks on board that are able to figure that out. And how will our drinking water and recreational water bodies be protected? Assuming that this means the Swift Creek Reservoir, again, there is no discharge into groundwater or local streams from any sort of industry. So it'd be stormwater, which again is treated up to the highest levels, through those additional requirements of the Upper Swift Creek relative to phosphorus and nitrogen removal. Why did county spend money that was needed to bring infrastructure to support what you approved for developing the Mosley area? In terms of the purchase of the property, the purchase price that it was $13 million, I think is right. When you look at overall acquiring property out in this area for schools alone, we would typically have exceeded that. So due to the unique nature of this particular property, we believe that just locating the schools alone makes it a good value proposition, but certainly the ability to generate employment and diversify the tax revenue is an important one as well. What stable sources of non-competitive federal and state funding have you identified to secure $700+ million to build out the Powhite Parkway? That's part of the conversation. I certainly think that, when this moves forward, there will be conversations with our state and federal partners to say, hey, we have this now. Let's talk about how we get the Powhite Parkway, and it's going to have to be through multiple sources. Obviously, it is a large dollar figure, so we do anticipate multiple sources needing to be used to do that. What is the projected cost to county taxpayers to build out the west site prior to bringing in industry? Again, don't have those dollar figures at this point, and it also is difficult to say because we don't know how much would come out of the Commonwealth's coffers as well as possibly the federal government. So it's hard to assign those costs absent knowing what the end user is and what it looks like. Why are these companies we're trying to attract not already in our current industrial areas? Again, that's because we have a lack of adequately sized industrial areas. We really don't have anything that would accommodate users of this particular nature. So that's why the zoning is being proposed, is to provide the canvas so that can occur. Is the board aware of any industrial businesses that have an interest in doing business in the area? We do not want manufacturing in our area. Why bring in industries we don't want? We don't want or need the zone. I think the zone industrial. I think it's fair to say that if you watched the presentation from Jason Alcubi the other week at the board, he did say that Intel, which I think is locating now in New Albany, Ohio, was interested in this site. So if you're familiar with Intel, again, it was a multi-billion-dollar investment in Ohio. So that was one of the particular users that could see a site viable like this. Again, the hurdle being that it's not currently zoned. And it is certainly needs some infrastructure. So those would be the two items from an Intel perspective that they would recommend would make it a viable site or would have for them. Please describe the water waste treatment facilities you keep referring to. We're not aware of any such facilities in this area of Chesterfield. So I'm assuming they mean wastewater treatment plants. So I could grab Mike again, but I think this would go down to Proctor's Creek. We have two, Falling Creek and Proctor's Creek are the two that we have. But yeah, we have wastewater treatment plants within the county. That's where the wastewater would go. You mentioned no drainage contamination. What mechanisms will be in place to regularly verify and ensure this? Will there be routine testing and third-party verification? Again, some of that's going to depend on what specific industry is there. Each one's going to vary as to monitoring requirements and permitting requirements. So again, I hate to say it, but it's just too early to say without having an industry. We're at the 8:30 mark.
Well, thank you, Mr. Smith. I have to say that was record speed for answering many, many questions. Thank you all for coming out tonight. And as we noted, there are still many opportunities for you and will be continued opportunities for you to be heard and to go online also and post any questions you have as a result of tonight. So thank you all, as well as those of you who joined us virtually for participating tonight.